This is a standard steamer. There's several different varieties. Notice it has a notch in one end. This is the part that sits on the stove. It heats up. You fill it with water just below this ledge here. Then you put the bath container in it with the holes poking out of that depression. Okay. Then you wash your grapes good in cold to lukewarm water. Wash them good and put them in the sieve. What this is going to do when you're full, you can set it in here. Try to keep the handles above each other. It makes life a lot easier. And you can fill it up to about that high above the top. And then you put this on it. Bring the water to a boil, and then turn it down just so it maintains a boil, but not a rolling boil, because this will run dry, and you don't want to do that, as we found out a few times. It doesn't affect the flavor of grapes at all. But what happens is water comes up. See this cone here? That's where the steam comes through from boiling water. It comes up, goes through the sieve, surrounds the sieve, permeates through all the grapes. The grapes' skins split open, and the juice starts draining into the holding tank, okay, which is below this cone. So this serves two purposes. It holds the water, the drink, up to below the cone height, and the heat comes up through here to break everything up. Does that make sense? Okay, good. So far, passed the test, I guess. Then, what happens is, after it's been boiling a while, you do your next step. You have a pan, a saucepan would work for your lids. The little flat jobs here. You throw them in the saucepan, heat them up. And the other pan, you take your clean washed bottles, which you've washed and rinsed and all that good stuff, flip them upside down, let the water boil, and it scalds them inside. And when the water starts dripping from the inside of the inverted bottle, then you take a hot pad, latch onto the bottle. You're going to have to pretend this has a lid on it. But before we go there, you're going to take it off the boiling, come over here, squeeze this, fill it up to the bottom of the throat, wipe off the top, take a scalded lid with a pair of tongs, put it on there, put the ring on, and that's it. Okay? Now, when you first take it off the boiling water to fill it, make sure you have a hot pad, because that stuff gets hot.
Do you have that green thing on?
I'm coming to that. And since it is hot, these grippers, you put it right around the neck of the jar like that, and then you never burn your fingers. You have two types of grapes. You have your eating grapes and your juice grapes. Concords make real good juice. Now, relative to the heat, make sure your bottles are hot, because the steam will kill the bacteria that might be in there. And one way to avoid getting bacteria in there is when you've used up the bottle, when you open it, don't throw this lid away. This is going to save you a lot of work. You heat it up to make this rubber soft, so it'll seal. Now every lid comes with a little dimple, a little rise in the middle of the lid. Once you put it on, screw the lid on, it starts cooling, you set it aside, you go about doing what you're doing. About 10 minutes later you'll hear, just hand it around, so we don't have to play World War II games.
Okay, what happens though is this thing sucks down flat. That's how you can tell if the jar is sealed. But if you can go like that, then you know your jar isn't sealed, and you're probably going to have to, if you can't use the juice, then you probably want to have to reheat it up to a boiling point again so that it will, you know, and try and seal it again.
Now, as I was saying, that dimple, as it cools down, you know that heat expands things. When it cools down, it compresses, it sucks that dimple in, makes it a vacuum seal. Okay? That keeps anything from getting in there. Now, once you've used that bottle of whatever it is, whether it be juice or fruit, take your used lid, flip it upside down, put your ring back on, because you've washed it, it's all clean. You can put it on your shelf like that. All you have to do is wash the outside of it off, give it a quick rinse, and you're ready to go. You don't have to wash everything again. So that'll save you some time there.
Inside of the old pack canner. Now, when you fill it up, I usually just fill it up about half full of hot water. And then when I'm putting the fruit into the bottles, and you always have to remember those same precautions that Dee mentioned. You always have to make sure that your bottles are scalded to kill any bacteria when they're empty. And you always have to make sure that you scald your lids. And as Dee mentioned, make sure that you wipe off after you put the fruit or whatever you're going to put in it. Make sure you wipe off this top before you put the hot lid on, otherwise it won't seal. Let's talk about canning peaches. Just so that I know that I have exactly the same amount of sugar in every bottle, I use the least amount of sugar as I possibly can. I never use more than, like with pears, but for a whole quart you only have to use like about 1/4 of a cup. But I didn't bring a wooden spoon. But what I do is I put the 1/4 of a cup of sugar in the bottom of the bottle. Then I add about a couple of inches of hot water, but you have to stir it with a wooden spoon or a metal spoon on glass could break, right? You know, if you're clinking it. So if you use a wooden spoon, but just make sure that you dissolve that sugar really well, because it could cause problems if you don't dissolve it really well. That picture. All right. As you fill the pan up, probably about 2/3 full of hot water, you put it on the stove, you bring it to a boil. I always bring it to a boil before I add the fruit. Then you're just going to put your peach in there and just leave it in for a couple of minutes till you can see that you can kind of see a little change. You can see the crease, and that peeling will just peel off so beautifully.
Often you pinch it off with your thumb forefinger.
Right. And if you have a jar that has a narrow mouth like that, you're probably going to have to cut this peach like into quarters. So when I put the fruit in the bottle, I use this little thing so that the fruit can fit down in the bottle more easily. I put the wrap. It's easier if you do it while it's hanging on the slice. So you're going to fill up all 7.
Water level.
Right. Then, after you get all your quart jars in there, then you're going to let the rack down, and you want the water probably just right up to the top of the bottle. Okay, now if you're doing peaches or pears or apricots, 20 minutes for this size and 25 minutes for this size. Now, as Dee mentioned, you know, we usually start out when we're cooking the fruit with the heat on high. And once it comes to a boil, you don't want to boil your bottles so hard that they'll crack. So you turn the heat down. So you still keep a rolling boil, but not a really hard rolling boil. Does that make sense? Okay, you have to be a little bit careful. Set it right to... Oh, all right. After they have finished boiling, now this is going to be extra hot. I usually take a pair of tongs and I lift up these little things like this, and then I lift it up, hook it on here,
Using hot pad,
and then let it sit for about 5 minutes, and then have a towel on your counter, because you don't want to burn your counter, right?